Hello and welcome to this session. Hello and welcome to this session entitled FinTech Disruptors. Over the next 30 minutes, my expert panel and I will discuss how the North is becoming a global FinTech destination and how this sector is actually disrupting more than just the financial area, but transforming other industries as well. I'm pleased to be joined by Gary Woodhead, the Chief Executive and founder of CurveBlock, Polly Taylor-Pullen, the Head of Sales at Nivo from Manchester, Julian Wells, a Director of Whitecap Consulting and today representing FinTech North, and Luke Freeman, a Director of Whitecap Consulting who has led a number of funding rounds for FinTech businesses in the North. So the first question to you all is, why do you think the North is seeing such success within FinTech?
That's a very good question. For me, it is the diversity that we're seeing within the North as a general, that is making a transition, which is, it's blazing trails. Everything has predominantly always been within the M25, and what is growing in the North for me is an extremely positive element for startups, SMEs, innovators within FinTech, because it's actually bringing these products to realization, not with the bias that they're not located in London, which has been obviously one of the negatives of the birth of FinTech for me.
Nivo won Tech Startup of the Year last year. We've had great successes being based up here in Manchester, and we're part of a growing community. So I think it's a really exciting time, not just to be working for a startup, not just to be in FinTech, but also to be in this brilliant city. I think, 10 years ago when I graduated, there weren't that many opportunities really for grads entering a startup and B, a really exciting, fast-growing company in Manchester. And I'm glad to see now we are changing the tide. I think there are increasingly more opportunities for people to be based up here. And London isn't the first place that people think of now. I think Manchester is definitely up there. And it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I think Manchester should be on the map, and the more companies we can invite to this brilliant city, I think the better that the FinTech community will be as a whole.
We've seen the interest in FinTech grow and grow. We've seen the number of people that have got roles that relate to FinTech grow and grow as well, whether they're in kind of large established organizations or if they're in FinTech startups. The number of early stage businesses operating in FinTech has definitely increased. Even through COVID has increased. There's lots of new names around now right across the North, and I think it's the result of the sort of the ecosystem around the North growing to support early stage businesses generally. There's a lot more shared workspaces. There's a lot more incubator accelerator type places, and there's just a lot more interest in FinTech across things like investment and skills and just in profile as well. So I think all of that's contributing to raise awareness and make this seem like a really growing and exciting sector.
It's a variety of things, some of which the guys have touched on in some of the earlier answers. So there is a kind of very strong funding scene up here. I think Manchester's the second biggest city in Europe in terms of PE after London. And a number of those PE firms, not just in Manchester but Leeds in the northeast as well, are particularly focused on check sizes, which really suit fast growth scale up businesses. So writing checks anywhere between sort of 250,000 up to 5 or 6 million, and that's a real sweet spot for companies that are in that stage of early growth, but fast growth too. There's some great unis churning out some great talent. Leeds, Manchester, again northeast unis too. And there's a good established sort of cadre of professional advisors as well. So that kind of infrastructure that fast growth businesses need to really thrive, all of that exists in spades across the North.
That's fantastic. I think it's always interesting to sort of hear how the region has the building blocks for that success. But Gary, picking up on what you said, traditionally it has been that London-centric model. Obviously, CurveBlock are on that growth journey and startup journey. Have you faced any significant challenges through being based up north, or have you seen more opportunities because of it?
Challenges certainly on securing investment in the seed stage. We have pitched to more than 400 individuals, whether those are high net worth individuals or organizations, and we've had over 400 no's. Yes, there's over 20 people on the cap table now, and there's a venture capitalist, but we struggled to find investment from the north, which was a sad thing. Possibly my accent didn't help. So that was a negative, but you've got to look at the huge positives, just beyond fundraising. It's not just about fundraising. You look at how you can leverage the world ultimately going virtual, and you no longer need to be rooted in a country's capital city to basically succeed. The COVID, as an example, that got us in bed with Founder Institute Silicon Valley. If you wanted to get into bed with Silicon Valley, you had to go there for a quarter of a year. They went virtual, so we were able to leverage that. And I think that's the huge positive for startups and SMEs within these sectors. The reality that the transition has now occurred, and people will engage irrespective of where you're based now, which, as a lot of you will understand, 10 years ago, it would have been difficult. So there's been positives and negatives for us, but for us personally, there's been more of the positives just because of the mindset of everybody operating in these spaces, of that transition into the virtual interaction and geographics now being acceptable irrespective of where you are.
I think that transition is really interesting because we've seen over the last 12 months, an acceleration of adoption in the adoption of technology in sectors that were quite old-fashioned, might be the wrong word, but quite traditional, and quite, obviously FinTech has been at the forefront of many technical developments, particularly around the security, because of the very nature of the industry. Do you, or do any of the panel, see real opportunities to leverage what is being successful in FinTech in other vertical sectors?
Yeah, I think so. Ben. I think when you look at FinTech, and we study this sector in quite a lot of detail. When you get down to the underlying technologies that power FinTech, they're not specific to FinTech. They're just the latest technologies, things like AI, things like blockchain, as Gary knows, things like RPA. All of this stuff is kind of there for other sectors to use as well. So and I don't necessarily think that FinTech's been the leader. I think there's a lot of data related and digital sector developments that FinTech's learned from as well. But you can see other sectors. I think the legal sector is quite regularly cited as now starting to emerge quite well. Legal tech being a phrase, and law tech, phrases that get used quite a lot. There's a bit of overlap there with FinTech because of the sort of the fraud, the anti-money laundering side of things, ID and verification. There's some crossover there between what those two sectors need. So yeah, I think that you see it in other sectors. The health sector is another one that's often quoted, that the adoption of the digital health and health tech is also increasing, and that's a strong sector across the north too.
Yeah, I think for us as well, just to complement that, Julian, is who would have thought FinTech has the ability to democratize the world's largest asset class, which it does, because the technology ultimately allows hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. So it can manage the foot traffic of allowing the public to basically be the primary financial beneficiary of the world's largest asset class. The technology is immutable, so it can't be edited. And it just brings that transparency, and it brings liquidity. So yeah, who'd have ever thought 10, 20 years ago that you could basically make the public in a position to basically make them kingpin on an asset class that they historically have not really had access to. And it's for me, it is extremely innovative and revolutionary, but for social good, because what we're doing, it's a shared economy. So the public are the winners, not the traditional methods such as senior debt or high net worth individuals. So it pushes into that ESG, which I think FinTech, when you look at a lot of the innovation that's going on, a lot of it is primarily tech for good. It's correcting severely outdated and broken models, a bit like how I guess the challenger banks have taken the banking virtual.
I guess, Polly, for Nivo, they specialise in that communication between consumers and the banks and making that secure. Do you see, or are you looking at other opportunities to leverage the technology that you've learned in that sphere for other areas and other markets?
100%, yes. So Nivo, really, we could be working with any regulated service provider. Our whole ethos is about making it much easier for that consumer to contact and transact with that provider. So yeah, we've seen our product evolve from being a secure communication channel to then layering in different fintech features. Open banking is obviously a really hot topic at the moment, where we're seeing lots of organizations really lean into the idea of open banking, presenting that as a benefit to their customers, things like that. We've talked about ID&V as well. So yes, I do think a lot of the providers out there at the moment are looking for more innovative ways to really improve their customer experience, but also leverage all the brilliant technology that's out there. And sometimes it's much easier than they think. Partnering with a provider can be sometimes easier than building it in-house. So yes, we do see that quite often. And just building on from a point that Gary mentioned earlier, I mean, Nivo had a different story altogether when it came to raising money. We actually did a raise in 2019 and managed to attract the majority of our investment from northern investors, GP Bullhound being the largest one. And I think it can be an advantage being based up in the north. I know we tend to talk about the London versus Manchester divide in most of these panels, but I think we have been able to use the fact that we are based up in the north as a strength, as an advantage. Most of the clients that we're speaking to now are based in the north, and quite like the idea of having somebody down the road that they can go and speak to, as opposed to having to get on the Pendolino to go down to London every time. So I think it's some of those companies that feel like previously they have been neglected by the large technology providers that are never going to come and visit them in Leeds or in Manchester, and quite like the idea of partnering with a smaller firm that is based locally. So I think, yes, we definitely see two sides to that coin, but definitely want to emphasise there are advantages to it as well.
I'm a big fan of all things advantage of being northern, having proudly never left the north, just moving slowly east. But Julian, obviously Nivo and CurveBlock are both, for want of a better term, born and bred in the north. As the country and the government looks to build back better and level up the northern economy, to hit the right buzzwords, do you see that northern fintech has a genuine sort of role to play in that, and how we build it back?
Yeah, I think the timing, obviously there's a lot of things been going on recently that are not very helpful to anyone, but when you weigh up where we are now and where things might be going for the north, I think we're in a great position. So the impact of COVID's been to level out some of the geographical issues that have been challenges for northern based businesses in the past. Not only for businesses based in the north, but for businesses thinking about being based in the north as well. So the sort of inward investment angle. But then you've got this levelling up agenda and that the spotlight seems to be firmly on the north. So wherever you debate levelling up around the UK, the conversation comes to the north. Certainly with the policy, sort of the policy makers that I've been talking to in London, they want to talk about the north first and foremost. It's the big prize, and obviously it's linked. Some of that's linked to politics, of course, but there's also the size of the economy in the north, and I think for fintech, there's a lot a lot of good can happen there. We recently saw the Khalifa review released, and that's a strategic review of UK fintech for anyone who's listening who doesn't know about that, and that's looked at how can we build the fintech sector in the UK, and it had five specific chapters, and one of those chapters was about national connectivity, and that national connectivity chapter is all about levelling up. It's all about how do we help the different fintech clusters around the UK to grow and prosper themselves and connect to each other. So it's trying to take the sector out of London and make it more of a national thing. And in the north, there's 10 clusters cited around the UK, and 2 of them are in the north. It's the only part of the UK that's got 2 clusters. There's one that spans Leeds and Manchester, and there's another that spans the northeast with Newcastle and Durham. So it's we've been highlighted there as a real strong fintech centre, or 2 strong fintech centres across the UK. And I think as the actions from that report start to work through, then we'll see more and more support and encouragement for the northern fintech economy.
Luke, you've we heard Gary talk about the challenges there are, or there have been in some instances raising funding. What is the appetite amongst investors, both at home and overseas, for the northern powerhouse and northern disruptors, for want of a better term?
I think there's a massive appetite for businesses that kind of fit a certain profile. So, and there's no doubt that I think it's still the case that a business that can authentically describe itself as being a fintech business attracts a certain sort of cachet and a certain premium on a valuation. Partly because it's still it's very much a kind of hot sector, and partly because if you kind of put yourself in an investor's mindset, then the prospects for a successful and a valuable exit from that investment a few years down the track is also expanded if a business has that kind of fintech title. But clearly, that doesn't kind of get rid of all the normal principles of pitching for funding. Most funders, certainly in most funders in the UK, let alone in the north, still prefer businesses that have got a bit of traction, that have built up a bit of a customer base, that have got some revenue sort of in their immediate past and commitments for the future. And so for fintechs that are pre-revenue, I can entirely see that finding funding might still be a challenge. But there's we talk to PE houses all the time, and there are businesses that have got a proven proposition, even if they're very early stage, but they can demonstrate any level of traction with that proposition, that have that fintech label, are enormously attractive to investors. There are a number of PE houses based in the north who look after funds that are very much focused on businesses that are based in the north. So that point that Polly was making about that sort of virtuous regional circle, that also applies. Take on board. Gary's experience was different, and I'm sure there are really good reasons for that. But most investors that we talk about, having that fintech label definitely makes a prospect even more attractive.
So looking at that sort of wider economic growth and levelling up agenda, a few weeks ago, Rishi Sunak, gave the budget that was to help the country recover, and clearly backed the green revolution further. We've seen the infrastructure bank coming to Leeds, and investments in other parts of the north. What role do you think fintech can play within that that environment? I know you touched on it briefly at the start, Gary, with saying that you think there's a real opportunity in ESG, but what opportunities do you see within that green economy?
Well, I mean, for us as an example, the assets that we're developing are MMC, so modern method of construction homes, all green. They don't require fossil fuel. They produce more surplus energy than they consume. So it's it's a significant. It will have significant impact in what we're doing within real estate. It's the biggest polluter of carbon globally. The big PLCs house builders are too big to make the needle move quick enough and make the transition from traditional into MMC and renewables. But yeah, it's a core element of what we're doing, and obviously we're underpinned by FinTech platform for the public. So it's a good credential for us. Whether we will be involved with this governmental fund that they're basically going to execute and put in place in the north, we may be too early for them as a business. Same with Homes England. You know, we've had meetings with Homes England, and for us, it's more of a case of when you've got to say your third or fourth development, then there can be huge collaboration with governmental bodies to basically accelerate and scale this. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. But I think it's one of the most promising parts is the work that Whitecap and Ian, the professor Ian Catcher from Leeds have done to basically get that involvement secured for Leeds and the North in general.
So looking outside of our own shores, and you know, in an increasingly international world, as we've said, I think the last 12 months have shown how interconnected everything is. What opportunities are there for the fintech scene and disruptive companies like CurveBlock, like Nivo, to start exporting their products or their IP abroad? And what can we learn as a region from our overseas neighbours, and should we be doing more of? Does anyone want to try and answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so we were approached when the VC backed us. We were approached by the High Commission of Canada to basically have introductory meetings and just exploratory chats. But to cut a long story short, the technology is FinTech. It can be rolled out anywhere. It's basically tablet, laptop, mobile-based product. It's just about the regulatory bodies and obviously getting the relevant approval for those jurisdictions. So that can be rolled out globally. And yeah, they basically approached us. There's a huge problem in Canada with what's called the First Nations. So these are the Indigenous people, the original people of Canada, that are ultimately isolated all around the country. Huge housing and infrastructure problems. And basically the High Commission and the Department of International Trade are all now at the table to take the product and scale it into Canada. And both are easily doable because the tech is tech, it's just about regulation. And then the asset aspect, we're not reinventing the wheel. Modern method of construction, it's all around the world. Many companies do it. It's just very few choose to integrate renewable tech. So for us, it's about two strategic partnerships, and that's civil engineers and volumetric manufacturers for Canada. And it can be rolled out within as quickly as a year.
Wow. Polly, I guess, is Nivo looking at those overseas markets as well? As you said, the technology just feels like it's ready to go. You've got the proven track record now. Is that something you guys are doing?
Yeah, for now the focus is first and foremost on the UK market, but absolutely, I'd love the idea of setting up another office elsewhere. I think that's obviously the goal, but for now, yeah, very much focused on the UK market, and think we've got massive potential here, to be honest.
I think one of the things, Ben, that's that's characteristic of fintech, like a lot of other quite sophisticated markets, is the opportunity for partnerships. So the idea that different providers can collaborate with each other to create solutions for clients, and the idea that more corporates would look to partner with technology providers than to build things their own. That's very much a sort of pattern that we're seeing. And if COVID's taught us anything, it's the fact that productive conversations and partnerships can be created almost irrespective of where people are physically located. So and that's something. So I don't necessarily see this personally as being a thing where fintechs that are based in the north should be seeking just to kind of go outside the north and sort of dominate other geographies. But there's absolutely not an opportunity for northern-based fintechs to collaborate with clients that could be almost anywhere, with other providers that could be almost anywhere, and that real kind of resolute focus on continually looking to improve the quality of the problem solving that you're doing for clients, then that kind of is a much more open way of thinking about where your clients are and how you might create those solutions and who you might collaborate with to create those improved answers for customers.
Quite interesting over recent months watching the amount of international activity. So, with Brexit, I think there was quite a bit of nervousness around, what's going to happen outside of the UK. But in fintech, the UK is a world leader. We're right up there with the leaders across the globe. The fintech sector in the UK is way bigger than anywhere else in Europe, for example. And if I think about what FinTech North's doing at the moment, and I think in the space of a 6-week period, we've got trade missions running with Australia, with Singapore, with America and Canada, all so there's interest from all across the world. And the interesting thing about that is that those locations have always had a strong link with the UK, but it's usually been via London. But they're specifically wanting to have a link with the North and to sort of to do a virtual trade mission. Obviously, they're all virtual, but virtual trade mission with the North. And at the same time, we've got another one as well with Central and Eastern Europe, which is being run out of Romania, but includes several other countries sort of in that region as well. So there's loads of interest, and it's two-way. So it's partly those companies from those locations looking to see what they can do in the UK market. But if anything, from a DIT perspective, there's a real focus on how do we get UK companies from the north operating in other markets. Gary's just giving you an example, a real example there of what he's doing. But I think there's a real push to champion the northern fintech sector internationally, which be very interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years with that.
Certainly, and I guess we're coming to the end, and I think sadly we've lost Polly due to a technical issue. But as a question, I'm going to ask you all the same one. Looking ahead 12, 18 months or more, I'm not going to limit you. What do you think the next big disruption that's going to come out of fintech could be? It might not be within the financial sector, but what are you perhaps anticipating or watching keenly to see what comes?
I don't quite know what the exact answer to your question is, but there are a million use cases that we haven't even thought of yet within financial services and in a bunch of other applications. So to your earlier point about how can fintech apply to other sectors, but which are all about getting that sort of slight tangle between personal security and comfort that our data is being used in the appropriate way, and the million different ways that data can be pooled and used to create better solutions and to make everyday tasks easier and more automated. So I think for me, it's something around the way that FinTech works with that era of open data to create solutions that we haven't even thought of yet.
You know what Amazon and the internet did to the market, to the traditional marketplace in the creation of e-commerce. This tech for good aspect with real estate and empowering the public from the sector. That is a similar type of ramification against senior debt. So it will be an interesting one to watch.
Well, I think Luke articulated really clearly, probably something very similar to what I would have said. So, I think, you know, data and automation, absolutely critical to what's coming next in FinTech. Maybe if I sort of draw you to one specific area where that might get very interesting from a consumer perspective is personalization. So I think the more we can kind of use data in a very dynamic and controlled way that works well in a regulated environment of financial services, then people are going to be able to design not only their own experiences with the way they deal with different financial products, but also the products themselves, and be able to construct a loan or a mortgage or a savings or investment product that actually kind of suits you exactly as an individual. So I think that's one of the areas that I'm keeping an eye on and starting to see more and more activity in.
No, well, thank you very much, everyone. I think it's clear that FinTech is going to, continue to transform everyday life, whether it is the financial sector or other sectors that we are touching on. I'd like to thank all our panel for joining the session and you for watching it. Some of the speakers will be around afterwards or throughout the day in the networking area of the site. Equally, I would encourage you all to visit the expo area and, most importantly, enjoy the rest of Invest North. So thank you very much and have a fantastic day.